trying to peg inflationary expectations and drive them. Today it probably doesn't mean the same thing as it meant at that time. It's sort of, the 2 to 3% doesn't apply irrespective of the nature of inflation, in my view. And you should be more flexible about it. And right now, so much of inflation is in price increases that are beyond the control of the Reserve Bank. I mean, world oil prices, it's a world food shortage. There's been an impact of the drought on food. Commodity prices have been exploding to sort of 35-year highs for our terms of trade. I mean, a lot of those price increases are beyond the control of the Reserve Bank. So it doesn't matter how much they put up interest rates. They're not necessarily going to bring down the measured rate of inflation.
But Henry makes the point that based on just the raw statistics, the behaviour of the CPI can't be explained by higher prices of food and beverage, other consumption goods imports, and indeed not petrol. They don't make up enough of the basket.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's the direct effect. I mean, how many times does a petrol price get built into the price of a final good? In terms of all the transportation stages, say a pound of butter, it's starting at the farm, the number of times that fuel prices are built into it. I mean, I think it's easy to say that the direct effect is difficult to measure and it's relatively low, perhaps, but I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not an inflationary effect. And, people feel those price increases. I mean, it's important to that. But, and you can argue that there is a danger with all these price and cost increases now that you want to avoid the second round effects. You want to avoid the inflationary, the expectation effects that lead people to demand higher wages, to lead companies to try and put up prices and so on, just to compensate. You've got to get away from that mentality. But I don't think if the range was 3 to 4 today, it would make that much difference to the responses you'd get.
But why not target it as low as possible?
Well, I just think if it's artificially low, it becomes meaningless.
The minutes from the last RBA board meeting were released today, and they show that in this latest month, the board was very close to pulling the trigger again. Yeah. And now the markets, particularly today, the currency market, is less convinced that the bank is on hold. How concerned are you about the current direction of monetary policy? Well,
I personally think that the Reserve Bank has increased interest rates too far. I think probably the last 2 increases were probably unnecessary. And because of the lags of sort of 9 to 18 months, we're not going to know that until the end of this year or, through the middle of next year. But the other thing that worries me is there's this simplistic notion developed, and I mean, I was one of the strongest advocates for the independence of the Reserve Bank and for targeting, but we now have a simplistic notion that somehow at the top of Martin Place, Glenn Stevens sits there and he's got a knob in the left hand called interest rates, and he can just turn that up at 25 basis points a time, and he's got a knob over here, the right hand, which is sort of growth and inflation. He can turn that down commensurately, and he can somehow fine-tune the economy with these knobs. I mean, that is nonsense. If a first-year economics student told me that, I'd fail them. Yet this simplistic notion has gone into the ether out there. People tend to expect that will happen. So when there's a pick-up in an inflation number, an unexpected inflation number, unexpected growth number, then there's expectation you're going to turn that knob again. And, if you think about it, if the cost increases and price increases are beyond the direct control of the Reserve Bank. Putting up interest rates by 25 basis points a time doesn't do anything about world food prices, doesn't do anything about world oil prices. Measured inflation can stay up, and what's the consequence? These interest rates actually bite. And the interest rates are a very blunt instrument. I mean, I once said it's like trying to tune a Ferrari with a sledgehammer. You ultimately will get it into shape, but it won't look particularly good, and that's what's happening to the economy. Those interest rate increases are biting, and they're biting very hard in some segments of the economy.